Here we have the sample create new user, which is found under the samples use case in use case 2 folder. I've imported the workflow into Eclipse, and we are going to change this workflow to add an additional activity at the very end of this workflow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a scripted task that will send out a tweet and grabbing the name of our newly created user and tweet about it. So the first step is to use the scripted task, and we'll put a meaningful ID, in my case tweet, and we'll call it welcome tweet. And I've prepared a Groovy script that essentially sends out the tweet, and once that is done, we're going to make sure that the last activity does not transition to end, but rather transition to include our welcome tweet, and then let our welcome tweet transition to end. And this concludes adding a scripted task to the end of the default create new user workflow, and by saving it and packaging it, we can now test the workflow. OpenIDM expects what's called a bar file, which essentially includes the necessary workflow definition, any other related files such as forms, etc. A bar file is essentially just a zip archive that contains these files, and it's deployed in the workflow directory of OpenIDM. So we're going to go ahead and create the bar file with the files needed for the create new user workflow. As you can see from this file list, we have the workflow definition as the XML file, and we have the 2 forms. In order to zip it up, we just pick a name. In my case, we're going to stick to the new user, create new user bar, and include the necessary files, and that will create the bar file. And in order to deploy the bar file, all we have to do is just copy the bar file to the workflow folder inside OpenIDM. And that's it. Now the workflow is deployed and automatically picked up by OpenIDM. Now it's time to test the workflow that we have just manipulated to include the scripted task that will send a tweet. We are following the sample use cases, and after having done use case 1 that essentially reconciles with OpenDJ and populates OpenIDM with a set of existing users or users, we're going to continue following the instructions and create a user and invoke the workflow. So I'm logging in using user 1, which was created during the reconciliation, and we're going to use this user 1 to invoke the workflow that we have just manipulated. We're going to fill out some information. And once we have done that, we're going to kick off the workflow and then log out user 1 and log in as user 0, which is the manager of this newly created user that needs to approve it. We're logging in as user 0, and we can see that it now has an onboarding approval. We're going to assign this to me, to the user 0, and we can review the request, all the information provided by the request, and then we're going to hit complete. That will now create the user, and it will also tweet. And as we can see here, the new tweet is or has been tweeted.